There we go. Okay. Hi, folks. I hope everything's going okay at this point. We had some technical issues on the way here tonight, so we're getting started late. My apologies. Um, okay. And here, full screen. Hi, so my apologies. We're not seeing. That was a rocky start. Okay, hi. I still don't have any audience. Okay. I see I got somebody. Hello, somebody. Hi, whoever's out there. We had no problems the first time. First two times. Hello, somebody's joined us. We had a rocky start, so we haven't actually started yet. I'm giving it a few minutes for people to show up now that we're over the technical issues. Um, okay. I got one person watching. Hello. If you say something in chat, we'll. Hey. Hello. Hey. So you're here on your own, but honestly, I'm gonna go ahead and start. There's now three of you. Oh, okay. Good. Good. I was concerned that people would think we weren't doing it because we got started late. My apologies. We had technical issues. Okay, but we're going. I I'm Ann Ogborn. I'm the director of Trans Rescue. Our mission is to get trans people out of dangerous places. We've gotten about 150 people out of dangerous places in all of the green countries. So our message today is you too can get out. If we gotten people out of these places, you can get yourself out. And this session is to help you make a plan to do that. Hi, Mai. Let's see. Okay. You're going to have to make a plan, and it's going to be determined by what you think is going to happen. People write us all the time and say, what do you think is going to happen? Our crystal ball is no better than anybody else's. So if you want... so you're going to have to figure out what you think is going to happen. And in particular, that's going to be more than one possibility. Here's an example of a plan. And a plan that... a scenario, it's made up of, in this case, 3 scenarios. If you... everybody should have a plan for an immediate bug out, for how to get out of the United States immediately, sort of at whatever cost. If things look like they're going to go bad in the next 24 hours. Basically, these folks, they have passports, they've got bags packed, and can get themselves over the border into Mexico in 24 hours. But their real plan is probably to get out by January 20, depending on how things look for the next 4 weeks. But if they're going to start selling off their property, and if things look ugly in mid-December, they'll fly to Europe and backpack around looking for work. Otherwise, they're going to wait a few months. They don't think it's going to happen immediately. They're going to interview remotely, let their child finish the semester, and then work on an in-company transfer to the EU, because they think they can get one of those. So that's a plan. That's a pretty typical plan. First step is to get a passport. I should say, if you have questions, stick them in the chat. We're happy to answer questions. This is our substitute for the moment for the one-on-one consults. So I think we'll just start. We're happy to stop and discuss people's personal situation or discuss things of relevance to them. So you want a passport. You must have a passport. We encourage you to use the urgent travel one-day service. That means you'll have to demonstrate that you have urgent travel. You can do that by getting a ticket over the border into Canada and booking a hotel for a night. Printing out an email from a friend inviting you up to Canada. But you need some kind of documentation, so you need a ticket. I encourage everybody to get the book and the card. I know that's the most expensive option, but definitely get the book. The card, however, means that you now have an extra piece of documentation, which is very useful if you are around the world somewhere. Trump is making it hard for trans people to replace their passports, and you lose your passport. It's stolen out of your hotel room or whatever. Having 2 pieces of documentation is good. You can apply once you have a passport, you can apply for a second passport and say, well, I'm going to be going to Palestine and to Israel in the next short time, or I'm going to be going to Saudi and Israel, and then be given, and so I have a visa conflict, and they will issue you a second copy of your passport if you need to if you have a need for that. So because if you have a stamp for Israel entry in your passport, you cannot enter many Gulf countries. So there's a little extra charge for extra pages. Definitely worth getting that. When you go to the one-day CAT service, you have to physically go there. There's a map on the site of where they are. You will need exact cash, so carry change with you because they won't make change. I've also had people tell me that they had trouble because they made their own passport photos. That's kind of stuck in the 1980s technology, but honestly, your life is just simpler if you just give up and go to the Walgreens or whatever and get passport photos made with the crazy Polaroid camera. Don't prefer having a passport over having a passport in the right name and gender. Don't be dithering around right now with trying to get a passport in the right gender. It's more important to have a passport. J.D. Vance has published a proposed bill that he claims they'll be pushing forward. I don't think it's serious because the way the bill's drafted, it doesn't look like a serious piece of legislation. But it is worrying that he's even doing that. Saying that they'll no longer issue passports with an X. If that happens, I don't know what happens if you need to renew or replace your lost passport. So you might consider whether it's wise to be getting a passport with an X at the moment. If your passport is within a couple of years of expiring, you probably should replace it. Many countries require you to have 6 months of validity on your passport to enter, but you, in practice, want as much as you can. On the other hand, you have to weigh that against the danger of handing your passport over to the government to be renewed at this time. So consider which one you want to do. The next step is to emotionally get ready. This is hard. We've been doing these one-on-one consults, and sometimes people cry during them. You're going to have to get ready to do it and accept that it's going to involve some pain. At the same time, I encourage treating it as a new adventure. Many people I've talked to who've emigrated, have said, wow, my life's like so much better. I don't know why I didn't do this a long time ago. And for many of us have never been outside the United States. It's a big place, and it's not uncommon for Americans to have never been to another country. So there's it's there's a lot of world out there though, and sometimes I encourage people to kind of watch those kind of idyllic travel adventure things. Some of them use danger as a kind of hook, but kind of see through that. And there's lots of lovely places in the world. You're not restricted to just the U.S. And certainly, as you make your plans, don't just look at the EU or Canada and say, well, I can't get into either of those realistically. So I guess I'm just stuck. Because there's 100 million lovely places to go. Actually, there's 192. I would say as you research, make sure your sources are trustworthy. There's a lot of misinformation in this area, I find. So if you're looking at a visa, prefer the official source rather than, random stuff. The other thing emotionally you're going to have to do is work this out with those around you. Almost inevitably, if you're part of a couple, one of you is going to want to get out more than the other. That's just almost inevitable, given that people can vary in how much they and how ready they are to go and how scared they are. By the way, if you have questions, anything to say, stick it in the chat. We're here for you. And if you have a, but you are going to have to work this out with your spouse. Then you're going to have to work it out with your family. They may have yay, mycelium. If you've got you may have to disentangle yourself from your family. I'm finding a surprising number of trans people are actually caretakers in some form for their parents. Then you're going to have to just come up to the fact that if you leave, you are going to be leaving your friends and your community. But this is the meat of the lecture, is the meat of this thing, which is talk about ways to get out. And the first set of ways is what I'd call normal emigration. This would be what most people think of, getting a work visa and going somewhere, or applying for any of the kind of normal immigration channels. And those are certainly valid. A second one is a rentista, which is a way of living in one country and working in another. For example, for a while I was living in the Netherlands and working in the United States. We'll talk about ways you might be able to get citizenship. It's not as unrealistic or improbable as it first seems. The world's full of kind of mostly young people who are kind of perpetual travelers and go around and volunteer at schools, and they live in an ashram for a while, and they go to a tourist area in Vietnam, and there's millions of people doing that, and you can too. The next option we'll talk about is the border. If you live near a border, you in some sense live on both sides of it, and there are ways to kind of end up in Canada because you live near the border. And then we'll talk about some ways that we don't encourage. I should say right up front, asylum. If you came here looking for how to get asylum, asylum's not actually an option for most American trans people. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. All right, the first one is just to find work overseas that somebody will then pay for a work visa for. Usually it's the employer that pays for that. You may have to offer the employer some inducement to get to overcome the hassle for them. Big companies tend to be more willing to do this than little companies, just because big companies have a HR department that's well familiar with the process, and little companies may have to hire an outside consultant, and that will be expensive for them. Okay, going to Canada. Your partner's a Canadian citizen. You want to get married in both the U.S. and Canada. Well, you got to get married somewhere. However, yes, you can enter Canada to stay up to 6 months. You can either then drive back across the U.S. border, spend overnight at a hotel, and then drive back again. Or you can apply for a renewal. But if you have an intention to get married, then all you need to do is to get married. I recommend you get married in Canada because your marriage might be attacked by a Trump administration. So Canada is the safer place to get married. So go up, have a big fancy wedding if you want, and get yourself married, and then that will come with it, with spousal, with a spouse visa. So you'll be able to go to live in Canada because you've married somebody there. As far as getting citizenship, no, do not do anything towards trying to get citizenship by another route until you have gotten married, because then they will think that your marriage is a sham, that you're only doing the marriage in order to get the citizenship. By the way, they're very good at detecting that. That's a very old trick, and they know all the ways of detecting it. So if you're going to get married, get actually married. Don't engage in a sham marriage. That will just cause you grief. Alyssa, the steps for you is essentially arrange go to Canada on a visitor visa, marry your partner, and then probably you ought to see an attorney about getting immigration into Canada, because you should then be able to reside in Canada as a permanent resident. Okay. Did you have more questions about that? All right. If you are above a certain age, even if you are too young for Social Security, if you move someplace cheap, you may have enough in savings to be able or be able to liquidate a house. If you can do either of those, if you can't afford an attorney, actually drop us a note. We do have an attorney on staff. Or see if you can find a legal aid in Canada. Our attorneys, I'm certain, going to soon become very overworked, but we do have an attorney. Our attorney is in Kenya, but seems to field questions from everywhere. I believe the process of getting a spousal visa may be something you can handle yourself, but you should look into it. Like I say, these are all going to be self-made plans at this point. Okay, back to retirement. If you are, if you move to a place that's inexpensive, you may be able to just retire on your savings at a surprisingly young age and with a surprisingly small amount of money. So that's something to consider. Here's another way of doing it. If you have a college degree or otherwise have something you can point at as a highly, to show you're a highly skilled worker, then you can take advantage of the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty. This is an agreement under which you deposit 5,000 euros, which is about $5,500, in a Dutch bank account and leave it there. You establish a company, which costs a few hundred euros, and then you live in the Netherlands. You are allowed only to operate your company, but your company can be a consultancy. So if you make your living as, for example, I'm a computer programmer when I'm not, before I started running TransRescue, and my company was just hiring Annie as a programmer. So if you can fit anything under the guise of I'm a company that does something. So if you're a janitor, you can instead be in a janitorial services company. Once you do that, then you are allowed to stay in the Netherlands, and that's a DAFT treaty. A filing for one is reasonably simple. However, once again, business consult. Well, that depends on what you can do. Don't become a computer software consultant if you don't know the first thing about it. But if you are, like I say, you literally can start a company that does janitorial services and then just be a janitor. That'll, what's a business to consult for? You mean as a client? That is going to depend on what skills you're offering and what you're offering. The Dutch tax authorities are not completely gullible. They will buy that you are running a janitorial. Web application development is fine. That's a job that I did for my, I was a software engineer my whole career, and being a contractor is normal even in the United States. Okay, if your partner has a writing degree, if she has let's say that there's a company that wants her to write for their online website. Maybe they're writing news or something, or educational articles for children. Whatever they do, they can instead simply pay her a consulting fee to do that same work. So your partner could come in on a DAF visa and say, I start we have a content company and we just contract out to make content for websites. I had a significant other who did that kind of thing once. I have no degree. I work in IT management. Yes, I think if you can demonstrate a history. How long have you been working in IT management and server making? Because that sounds like the normal. Okay, yeah, if you have 10 years of experience in IT management, then IT management consulting company, I think is perfectly reasonable to after business, and then you're just going to have to find work. But you could be an IT management consultant, and de facto what you're doing is being a manager in a company. It's just a matter of what is on your paycheck. I would recommend to most people that they go ahead, come over, and then set everything up here if they have the funds to be here for a while. If not, you can actually establish the company prior to relocation if you want to. But you may need to engage an attorney to do that. So it took me about 4 weeks to establish my company, but that was right when COVID was starting, so it was a bit crazy at that time. But you can certainly do it remotely, but you should be ready. You should be ready to come over immediately when the company is established, because amongst other things, you are going to have to sign the paperwork, and you'll have to be here in the Netherlands to do that. So you don't want to have too many trips back and forth, or that's going to eat into, begin to have costs mount up. Okay, that's daft. Okay. The next thing I'm going to cover is something you're having an issue making international calls. You mean the U.S. is having an issue with this? I didn't know that. Yeah, I'm not understanding you. There's a delay in this, so I only see, you guys only see what I say a few seconds later. Okay. So-called rentista or digital nomad visas. Many countries are perfectly happy to have you living there if your money comes from an outside source. For example, if you're a software developer and you are living in one country and then you have a client in another country that you send code to, you can certainly, you'll be welcome in many places under what are called rentista visas or digital nomad visas. These got started in Central America and are still very popular in the northern part of South America and Central America. There are lots of folks living there on these visas. And they usually require that you demonstrate that you've been making your living this way for a while. And there are a couple of downsides. One is that quite often they demand a kind of absurdly large amount of money. For example, I know $24,000 a year is a common figure, and that's quite a bit to live in some of these countries. Another is that they require you to demonstrate that you make this income every month from a constant source. And of course, that's rarely how somebody who's offering them their services out as a graphic artist or 3D animator or sound editor works. They get work in and they do the work and it goes out. I'm going to keep talking. I will go back. If anybody asks a question, we'll stop and we'll answer them. Okay. Another way is to become a citizen somewhere. There's really three ways to do this. One is, in many countries, if you have a parent or grandparent who is a citizen of that country, you may be able to claim citizenship. So if you trace your roots back to someplace else, as so many people do, spousal sponsorship is, I've been saying spousal visa, but it's a spousal sponsorship. By the way, we are going to have a special session on going to Canada. That's coming up. Given the jankiness of my tech tonight, I'm not going to change windows to go find that, but it's coming up. You can check on the calendar. And you probably should come to that. I'm not a Canada expert, but yeah, I think a spousal sponsorship is the phrase I'm looking for. A second way of doing it is that there's something called citizenship by investment. Basically, if you are willing to invest an amount that kind of varies, the cheapest ones are $50,000 in the U.S. dollars, and the most expensive ones, there are a few that are $400,000, but many are $250,000. But if you're willing to invest substantive amounts of money in a country, they will give you citizenship. This sounds pretty unlikely for many people, but remember that it's not too hard to have that much equity in a house. So if you own a home, the business can be a residence. So the investment can be a residence. So at least for many countries, some countries don't allow that, but quite often you can buy a piece of real estate and then simply move somewhere and be a citizen. And finally, yes, marriage is a way of getting permanent residence, and the only thing is I would discourage people from entering into a sham marriage. It's you're likely to get caught out. The immigration folks have gotten very good at figuring that out. Okay. The next one, this is more a solution if you don't have much money, if you're going around saying, I don't have the money to do this, I don't have the resources. Remember that the world is full of, there are two large groups of people on the who have very little money. One group is refugees, which is what you're becoming. One group is people who are, leaving Syria. All these folks, they don't have much money, and yet they are getting to another country. So it's not impossible. If you don't have money, you can get out. Now, a relatively pleasant way of kind of getting out with no money without and is to kind of go on the hippie trail, start becoming a perpetual traveler. There are a couple of options kind of under that. There's something called volunteer tourism. WWOOF is Willing Workers on Organic Farms. You go on a tourist visa to a place, and you have an organic farm experience. You trade a few hours of labor every day for food and a bed. Doing this can really cut down on the amount of money you spend. So even if you have a couple grand at the start, that you can go a very long time on that, because all you're doing is buying a new backpack when the old one gets out. Workaway.info is a similar operation. They are a little more focused on volunteer experiences, help teach at a school, that kind of thing. Workaway is both of these involve paying a fee to join them, because I think they do that partially to make money, but partially their motivation is that they want to have trust that you are who you are. So you need to know, since you're going to be going to somebody's home, basically. But they can be well worth it. We sometimes have placed passengers in such situations. Okay. You have an American passport, you are able to be a tourist in 144 different countries without ever applying for a visa. And that you can stay up to 6 months in many of those places. So if you're willing to commit to a rather peripatetic lifestyle, you can just wander around. And quite frequently, you will find your wandering stops when you do end up in some situation where you can work. There are a few other ways to kind of do this. You can work on a cruise liner or in the marine industry. Become a flight attendant. Uruguay doesn't need a visa for to go visit, but if you want to work, you're going to need work permission. The problem with working without work permission, of course, is that at any moment you can be thrown out, and also it's hard to access services. So I really don't encourage people to do that. Not out of some morality, frankly, but just because it's a thing to only do if you have to. It's quite frequently doesn't work. But yeah, Argentina is interesting. Argentina and Malta often compete for first place on ILGA's list of rights based on gender identity. So, okay. I'm going to move on to, will I be able to keep working my part-time? Yeah, actually, yes, you can definitely move to Canada and continue your part-time remote job in the United States. And in fact, if you have a remote job in the United States, you can go to Canada and live and then just keep your work in the United States, particularly if you cross over frequently. If they ask you why you're going to Canada so frequently, say, I've gotten married. and even while you're processing your sponsorship for permanent residence, you can go back and forth to the United States and just say, yeah, I'm here all the time because my sweetie's here. And in fact, this is kind of where I'm headed. Border life. This is the Peace Park in Seattle, which stands on the border of Canada and the U.S., and you will notice there is no border control at this point. And the fact is that the cities of Vancouver and is it Seattle or Tacoma? It's actually against the border. Run right up against the border, and while most of the residential streets are broken, there's nothing to keep you from just walking over the narrow grass strip. My partner lives in the U.S. at the moment, but has full Canadian citizenship. Is that going to complicate anything? No, I don't think so, except I would recommend that you go to Canada for the actual marriage. Get married in Canada. That's to protect you against Trump. If Trump decides that if Trump decides that you and your partner are not of biblically righteous enough genders to get married, then you could be in trouble if you're married in the U.S. If you're married in Canada, then you're married in Canada. And then it's Canada that makes that determination. So you may save yourself some grief if you marry in Canada, but I don't think it's a problem if your partner lives in the United States and is a Canadian citizen. You can have a religious ceremony or a ceremony wherever you want. I've never heard of anybody getting married in more than one place, but honestly, I would have to check it out. I have the impression you get married once, but um, um, but I'm not certain it's going to make your life simpler. For example, suppose that you want to divorce at some point. That gets very complicated if you have a um, if you have a if you're married in one place and divorced in another. Um, I would recommend you talk to an attorney before doing that. And I probably should say at the front of these, I am not an attorney. Um, so we help people get from place to place, but this is not legal advice. Um, okay. There are a few ways that don't work. Um, and I'm going to run over here just a little because we did get started late. Uh, First of all, asylum. Many people come to us saying, how can I seek asylum? You can't. Um, Asylum requires that you would be subjected to death, torture, uh, grave bodily harm, or um, long imprisonment, or conditions intolerable to life on your return, and um, it's you generally are not going to be able to demonstrate that. So at the moment, you cannot really claim asylum. A few trans people have successfully prosecuted asylum claims from the United States, but I don't recommend it. Furthermore, even if you do succeed, it's a very hard life. Being an asylum seeker often means you're stuck in some camp, um, sometimes for 2 years, and it's going to be a major disruption of your life. So don't seek asylum unless it's the only way out. Certainly, if the United States gets to where it's immediately deadly and you're in Canada and they're about to push you over the border and claim asylum, or anywhere else in the world. But don't do it unless you have to. Another thing not to do is avoid overstaying, because if you get deported from a place, you're going to have trouble getting into the next one. Far better to get out if your visa's expiring. It's far better to get out before it expires rather than after. Don't think, oh, they won't catch me, because they eventually will catch up with you. It's very difficult to live in this modern world without showing paperwork frequently. And finally, this is advice not about you moving, but moving somebody else. Do not help a minor to move unless you are their parent or legal guardian. That is the crime of child trafficking. And yes, even if it's a 17-year-old trans person who's just trying to get away from their crazy religious parents. What constitutes help can be pretty minor. So don't do it. We will talk to minors. We will not help them move. We will talk to them about what they can do once they get over 18. But if you are a minor and you're listening to this, there really is very little you can do until you turn 18. That doesn't mean you can't get out. It means few people can help you. If that resembles the Fugitive Slave Act, that's what it resembles. Okay, some issues that'll come up. You're going to run into figuring out you've got various commitments and you got possessions. You're going to say, well, but I don't want to let my team down at work. I'm taking care of my elderly mother, etc. And you're going to have possessions that some of them you're going to lose. If you are on disability, we're going to have a special session on getting out when you have disability. If you're on SSI, you may indeed have to give up the SSI to get out. If you're on SSDI, you can probably move with the SSDI. My experience in the United States is that people who are getting disability payments often because they're not allowed to work, they feel like they can't work and can't be independent. So, but there are many ways to have a job that is sort of adapted to your disability if you aren't under that restriction. And then finally, money. And we're going to have a section on moving with no money. We really believe anybody can get out, including folks with no money. People do it all the time. People get out of lots of places in the world when they have got very little money. I've helped people get out who had so little money that that we had to buy them shoes because they were going to get on an aircraft. We bought them a plane ticket out. And then they said, by the way, I don't have any shoes. And they won't let me on the airplane without shoes. So we bought them shoes. Okay, that's my comments. Thank you for listening to me blather. I have a little reward for you for putting up with me, and that is you get to know the super secret hotline where you can ask questions, and we're going to try and prioritize answering those questions first. And that's at usaquestions@transrescue.org. Outside of DAFT, are there other methods to make safe landing in the Netherlands? Yes. There's citizenship by investment program. You can marry somebody. You can get a job here. The Netherlands has an au pair program, so-called working holiday program that you can sign up for. You basically do child care. There are some other jobs you can do. Thank you. We're trying to be quick. I will tell you, if you emailed today, today was the day I said, okay, I got to do something else other than respond to emails. But we try and be quick. Mycelium, the one that's on the screen. usaquestions@transrescue.org. I am trying to get to. We have questions coming into basically every public email we have, but this is the one that I'm prioritizing. People are also sending to USA campaigns. Send a USA campaign. Is there a good way to volunteer for us, or to volunteer in general? Yes, we'd love to have you. Drop us an email at volunteer@transrescue.org. Yeah. Uh, um, uh, I'll warn you, it may be a few days before we get to those, given how backed up we are right now. But yeah, we have somebody who is just taking on volunteers at this time, so we're cranking away at that. Okay. Yeah. Mycelium, yes, we're going to need people. By the way, if you're in the United States, we are beginning to get some volume of emails of people offering sofas, or offering to drive people to the border, or saying, I can, I have a restaurant and I'll give you a dishwasher job for a week if you need it. That kind of thing. What if we move there and get a job, but it doesn't come with a visa or relocation package? Should we get married in the Netherlands? Well, I wouldn't. I believe in consent. Are you saying you have a partner? It won't do you any. There won't be particularly any advantage of getting married in the Netherlands if neither of you has at least permanent resident status. I'm a permanent resident of the Netherlands. If I marry somebody who's a Brit, then yeah, they can come to the Netherlands as my spouse. But if two Americans come here and marry here, that's not going to confer anything. In fact, I'm not even certain you're allowed to do that, honestly. Is that what you mean? Say a bit more. By the way, if there's somebody in America who wants to volunteer, I actually have a specific thing. I could use somebody who'd be willing to help with a project that involved being in the United States. It's a pretty short-term thing, but we have somebody who's an American who's out and doesn't want to return, but needs to do a couple of small things. I don't want to say what they are here. If you but if you'd be up for helping another trans person. Okay, great. Honestly, I see your question. The thing is, if you get married, if you come here by some other method, like you get a job here, and you then get married here, your marriage is not going to be threatened by craziness in the United States. On the other hand, if you get married, then only one of you actually needs to find a job. The other one is then the spouse and can come in as a spouse. But yeah, you might. That's Okay. Got more questions? We're going to be having special sections on the DAFT Treaty, on Canada. What else came up here? On somebody asked about something. And let's see, DAFT Treaty, Canada, and yeah. By the way, somebody mentioned that they were a web developer. We're actually reaching out to some tech recruiters, and we were kind of trying to do that before this all blew up. And the tech recruiters have finally woken up now, only now. But we are trying to set up a pipeline where essentially tech recruiters get access to our pipeline, and in return they have some agreement with us that they do help try to get our people out. So we're hoping would getting married get you a visa? If you're both Americans, no. I mean, they're not just letting in random married people. Now, if one of you has a visa, one of you is a permanent resident already, that means they have a visa that lets them stay basically forever. Then if you get married, the other person can come. And that's going to be true whether the marriage happened before or after they became a permanent resident. So, but it won't help you to be married if the only way it will help you to be married is to get the other person there. The first person's got to get to wherever you're going. I've talked to a number of couples, though, and it's quite just an economic reality. It's pretty common for a couple to have a situation where one has a fairly stable, ordinary job that it'd be easy to get a work permit for, and the other has a more entrepreneurial thing. So couples where one person is a software engineer and the other is a travel writer or a fine artist, then the software engineer gets a job here. Excuse me. And then they come over as a couple. And the other, the partner's here on a spousal visa. Does this all make sense? I wish you all luck. Tomorrow we will have an office hours session. This will be a Google call. The tech recruiters, if you're interested in the tech recruiting, shoot us an email and say you're interested in, either like send us like your qualifications and your CV, or send us a, and we're still honestly setting it up, but we're going to start matching up recruiters and companies and folks, and then shoot an email to the volunteer line. Yeah. Okay. Yep. All right. I hope everybody has a good evening, and good luck to you all in getting out. And I think with that, we'll be off. All right? Bye-bye.